All right, hi again. I wanted to give you a flyover of the literature story so that you can choose with some knowledge and, of course, get into the thing link and explore a little bit too. So, as I said before, you have four different stories. And the first one, The Celestial Railroad, is probably the most challenging of the four stories that you get to choose from. Do not avoid it just because it's challenging. It's challenging, but some of you are definitely up for the challenge. So, this is a difficult but rewarding story. If you have read Pilgrim's Progress or you're pretty familiar with it, plus your familiarity with the Bible, both of those together make you more prepared to walk into the story. So do feel free to still tackle this story, even though I am giving you the heads up that it is a bit of a challenge. A couple of things that will help you. Your book head note on page 274 gives you clues to understanding this, really strong clues. So check out the head note, skim read it. Don't try to understand every single last thing in it. Skim read it, then read the story, discuss a little bit, skim read that head note again, and you'll probably pick up more going at it that direction. You'll have to remember what an allegory is. So, a symbol in a story is an object or setting or character that has meaning besides its literal meaning throughout the story. But an allegory takes it to another level where almost every single part of the story has an additional non literal level, and the story together then has a non literal level. So, a Celestial Railroad is an allegory. You'll have tons of things that you could do with figuring out what is symbolic in that story. So that's kind of the fun side. And then the ending is extremely fascinating. And if you tackle the story, you should ask yourselves, why does Hawthorne end the story that way? All right, the Maypole is what I would classify as a high intermediate. So the storyline is a little bit challenging to get into. It's a little bit slow moving at first. It has a lot of descriptive terms, a lot of allusions. It is the entire story is an allusion to a historical event, which you'll probably want to try to figure out. But once you get what's going on in the story and you try to analyze the symbolism, it's the symbolism side seems a lot more accessible. So that one's definitely on the medium level. Again, use your book head note. And a key to cracking this story is figuring out what the central symbol of the story is. And I think you can figure that out. Also look for additional symbols. And then if you are entering the discussion about viewpoint in this story, you will want to ask yourself, what is the role of Edith and Edgar? What's their significance? Or how do we feel about them versus the Puritans or the other partiers? So Maypole is there. Minister's Black Veil is kind of like the flip side of Maypole, where the storyline is a lot easier to walk into and get right away. But then trying to pin down what's going on the symbolic level becomes a little bit more mushy, but fun. So you can take the Minister's Black Veil and things that will help you there. Again, your book head note, skim through, reading that maybe before and after you read the story itself. And then in your thing link board, the YouTube video embedded in the Minister's Black Veil is a great resource for getting a quick access to the story just to get your thoughts going. Warning though, that YouTube video is not actually the full text, so it doesn't count for your reading the book. And then probably the most accessible story is The Birthmark. Just you can follow the storyline. It probably engages pretty quickly. And then the literary analysis is, for the most part, the symbolic level, it can be figured out. Use your book head note. And then also you have an extra tool for this one. If you were with us in ninth grade, you studied Dr. Heidegger's experiment where the elderly scientist calls his friends in to drink the elixir of youth and then watches the effect on them, and they revert back to being young and do exactly what they did when they were young. So you might remember that story. They were dancing around the room and knocked over the elixir, and Dr. Heidegger decided that going back into your youth is a horrible idea. So that will help you because the birthmark and Dr. Heidegger have some familiar like ways symbols are used and some familiar themes, small themes. This is a new concept, so let's talk about ambiguity for a minute. Ambiguity marks much of the stories of Nathaniel Hawthorne, so you need to understand it. So I'm using a picture here to illustrate. Who is this a picture of? And you probably saw one or the other more strongly first, but this is a great illustration of ambiguity because ambiguity in a story is when an author strategically builds two or more possible meanings into the text. So on purpose, built in. The outcome is that you as a reader could reasonably, like with story proof, argue for two totally or three slightly different points of view based on the same facts from the story. Some people define ambiguity as open-ended, but it's not just open-endedness. It's much more artistic and purposeful than just we don't know what happened next. That's not ambiguity. Ambiguity is tighter than that. It's harder to create than that. There are very good reasons to say this happened, but there are also good reasons to say this happened again. So why might an author use this sort of strategic, undeclared tactic? So an author might be ambiguous when he or she feels like he doesn't know or she doesn't know how to authoritatively say one side or one viewpoint or the other. An author might add ambiguity just for interest for the reader, especially in literary circles. Sometimes ambiguity communicates the realistic state of things. So maybe an issue or an answer is messy, it's not clear, it's not cut and dry. And so to write a story where it's not clear and cut and dry is what the author is trying to do just to say this is reality. You are specifically checking for ambiguity in your story. Every single one of your stories has at least some ambiguous feeling moments, if not very clearly ambiguous content. So why or when or how is Hawthorne using ambiguity? Is it possible that he feels conflicted about the issue of your story or the theme of your story? Is he avoiding a commitment to a particular side? And is that for a particular reason? Is he trying to demonstrate complexity involved in the situation or in the viewpoint? Or is he conveying a reality? So your job is to kind of think through. He could be then just trying to entertain or add interest or get people thinking. So you need to discover A, where is ambiguity in my story, and then B, work with your classmate to try to figure out before you create your video what might be the function of the ambiguity in that particular story. All right, here's some extra food for thought about ambiguity. Can absolute truth and ambiguity coexist? Are there any examples of ambiguity in the Bible? Can you think of any ways that ambiguity shows up in your life or in the things that happen around you? What's the difference between ambiguity and the belief that all truth is relative or subjective? Do you prefer stories with or without ambiguity? And if you were to write fiction, would you use ambiguity? Why or why not? All right, remember, even as you're looking through the new literary aspect of ambiguity, I am here for you. And when you have your ideas, you can run them by me and I will point you in the right direction or give you more to look into or encourage you that you're headed in the right direction. Any of those, I will be in class rotating among you, responding to your needs. So I can't wait to see what you produce.